Welcome to the unit on the Russian Cyrillic alphabet. Even though this is being recorded as part of our COPIUS Introduction to Mari, this video can also serve as a foundation to like an introduction to the Cyrillic alphabet for other minority languages of Russia and other countries of the former Soviet Union that use Cyrillic alphabets. Experience has shown that students have an easier time understanding the logic behind the Mari Cyrillic alphabet or the Udmurt Cyrillic alphabet or the Tatar Cyrillic alphabet if they understand the Russian Cyrillic alphabet, because all these languages use adaptations of the Russian alphabet that adapt the Russian logic, so to say, to better suit their needs. In this unit today, though, where we're going to look at the Russian Cyrillic alphabet as its foundation, I am joined by a native speaker, Ksenia Shagal of the University of Helsinki, who is going to be producing the native pronunciations of the Russian words we have in these materials, so you don't have to be subjected to my best attempts. A caveat before we get going is that there are certain aspects of Russian phonology which we are not going to be covering in this unit. If you are studying Russian, these are things that you have to figure out at some point, but they are very specifically Russian aspects of phonology that don't really translate to minority languages of Russia. So we're not going to get into them here. And these are features that can be very obvious if you're learning Russian. Like here you see three words with simplistic transliterations that don't take the peculiarities of Russian pronunciation into account. So like the first word.
Молоко.
So as you heard here, she did not pronounce the three vowels the same way. This is the reduction of unstressed vowels, which are very typical in Russian. We're not going to be discussing this. Or the second word.
Без.
As you heard, the consonant at the end was not a voiced z, as is written here, but a voiceless s. This is final obstruent voicing, also typical of Russian, but you don't have it in Mari, for example, so we're not discussing it now. Or the third word here.
Этого.
So this is here the letter which usually represents a g sound here represents a v sound. This is just in the genitive ending in Russian, this letter is pronounced as v. Something you have to accept when learning Russian, but this is very specifically a Russian thing, so we're not going to be delving into these things. We are, however, going to be learning all the letters of the Russian alphabet and learning some important mechanisms that do translate to other languages using the Cyrillic alphabet. Before we get started, just wanted to briefly mention how I learned the Cyrillic alphabet. Many years ago, I was at a pizza parlor in Tallinn, in Estonia, with a friend, and we were waiting for our pizzas. And in doing so, we were bored and we were looking at the menu, and it was the menu was in 4 languages, and it was Estonian, Finnish, English, and Russian. And I was amused by the fact that there's this multilingual menu, and it's just saying Margarita, Margarita, Margarita something, Cardinale, Cardinale, Cardinale something, and no other information. I thought, okay, great, multilingual menu, and then you're saying the same thing over and over, like 3 times is what I said. My friend said, well, actually, they're saying it 4 times. The Russian there is the same thing again. I mean, like, look at the word for Margarita, the third letter there. Doesn't that look like the rho symbol in the Greek alphabet? And because I had just graduated from high school, so I still remembered my Greek letters. And I said, oh yeah, it does. So if it's the rho in Greek, what's going to be in Russian? Well, probably an R. Yes. And then we saw, and then the gamma is after there. And yeah, so we started going through the pizza menu like this. And by the time our pizzas came, I knew most of the alphabet. I didn't know all of the alphabet because there are some letters that you just don't find in the pizza menu, but mostly the foundational understanding was there. And so this means this is as scary as the Russian alphabet might look if you're coming at it from the outside. Remember, it is just an alphabet. It has a number of letters that is comparable to the number of letters that we have in the Latin alphabet. The letters have their own values, and sometimes they're very similar to the Latin values. There's some that have some different values. There's some that you have to learn new, but it's just a few letters you have to learn at the end of the day. So as I just mentioned, there are some letters that are the same. This is the first set that we're going to look at. So if you see on the slide on the top, we have the bar here showing the alphabet as a whole, all the letters that we have in it. As we go through the alphabet, we're going to go through it in groups of letters. And as we go through it, this bar up on top is going to fill up. It's going to, in the further slides, it is going to contain the letters that we already looked at on previous slides. You can also grab yourself a piece of paper and make notes of your own if you prefer. And we're going to be adding groups of letters to this overview as we go through it. Note on how we're going to do it. We're going to go through these now with Ksenia reading the Russian word and me giving the English translation, which is usually fairly trivial because we have picked words for these slides that are either internationalisms, so words from languages like English most easily, but also some from German, French, Latin, Greek, or whatever that you are likely to know that English has too. And where it wasn't possible to do this, we have some Russian words and Russian names where it is where we hope that you would be some of our listeners will be familiar with them too. So Ksenia is always going to read it and then I'm going to translate it. If you are as a student watching this, our suggestion would be to pause the recording whenever you need to see if you can figure things out on your own and then listen to Ksenia and me read and translate the words and see if your solutions were correct. So the first set of letters are these 6 letters that are almost the same in the Russian Cyrillic alphabet as they are in the Latin alphabet. What this almost means, we're going to discuss this in the course of the slides, but generally these words should not yet present much of a problem for comprehension if you know the Latin alphabet, which at this point we assume that you do. Okay, shall we?
So the letters are A, Y, K, M, O, T.
So, and you might have heard that she pronounced this one as ye rather than e. What this y, what's happening there, stick a pin in that. We'll get back to that at a later point. For now, just accept that this is a so-called soft or yotated letter, and sometimes it is preceded by a y in pronunciation. We'll look at that then later.
Комета.
Comet.
Атом.
Atom.
Такт.
Tact.
Какао.
Cocoa.
Атака.
Attack.
Мекка.
Mecca. Okay. So for the next set of letters, these are ones where the letters are the same, but their values are somewhat different. If you have experience with the Greek alphabet, for example, from either from having studied Greek or just from mathematics or physics or whatnot, the Greek values of these letters are often more helpful than the Latin values. And as you see up here, we now already have the first 6 letters on the cheat slip here. So the letters we have here are
В, Н, Р, С, У, Х.
right. So
Контакт.
contact,
Театр.
theater.
Кекс.
Okay, English doesn't have this one. It's like a sort of a sponge cake kind of like cookie, isn't it?
Or a muffin.
Muffin, yeah. So if you know German, it's like German cakes.
Текстура.
Texture.
Вена.
Vein, and if it was an uppercase V, then it would be Vienna.
Рококо.
Rococo.
Хор.
Choir.
Характер.
Character.
Номер.
Number.
Маска.
Mask.
Торт.
Like tart, like the kind of cake.
Ресторан.
Restaurant.
Торонто,
Toronto,
хакер,
hacker,
карат,
carrot,
тонна,
ton,
метр,
meter,
хаос,
chaos,
ватт,
watt,
текст,
text,
евро,
euro, and here remember we'll get back to the
уран,
uranium,
тур,
tour,
хунта.
junta, like a military junta. Okay, great. So the next set of letters that we have here are letters that they're going to be new if you're coming from Latin, but they have striking similarities to Greek letters that you might know. For example, if you remember pi, what pi looks like in Greek, Russian P looks very similar to that. If you remember what Greek gamma looks like, Russian G looks very similar to that. So should we do the values of the letters? Yeah.
Г,
Mm-hmm.
Л,
Mm-hmm.
И,
Mm-hmm.
П, Д, Ф.
Okay, and the words?
Кока-кола,
Coca-Cola,
фанта,
Fanta,
кино,
cinema. Okay, so English doesn't have this one quite like this.
водка,
Vodka,
ислам,
Islam,
университет,
university,
лампа,
lamp,
митинг,
meeting, but be careful in Russian, and as a consequence in languages that have all these words through Russian, meeting means a mass demonstration rather than like a meeting at work.
факс,
Fax,
стерео,
stereo,
проект,
project,
доллар,
dollar,
студент,
student,
пианино,
pianino, this is like an upright piano,
Франкфурт,
Frankfurt,
радио,
radio,
телефон,
telephone,
пигмент,
pigment,
лилипут,
Lilliput,
моно.
mono. Great. So now let's round off the consonant systems. Here are some letters where the Greek alphabet is not going to be of much help. These are there are some of these letters that actually originate in the Hebrew alphabet, as you are shown here. So that might give you some help, but most of these are just new ones you have to learn, and be especially careful with this one. It looks like a little 3, but it's a letter actually. And the pronunciations of these letters are
Б, Ж, З, Й, Ц, Ч, Ш, Щ.
great. So
Зоопарк,
zoo or zoo park, obviously, but yeah.
банан,
Banana,
сайт,
site, like a website.
бомба,
Bomb,
чемпион,
champion,
центр,
center,
банк,
bank,
хоккей,
hockey,
бизнесмен,
businessman,
жаргон,
jargon,
идеал,
ideal,
горизонт,
horizon. If you're surprised by the fact that the h in English corresponds to a Russian g, we'll get back to that too.
Файл.
file,
Центнер.
centner, this very old-fashioned measure of weight,
Почта.
post,
Шанс.
chance.
Зал.
Here's another one that the English doesn't really have. This is like a hall, like German Saal, if you know that.
Борщ.
Okay, this is borscht, this let's say Eastern Slavic soup.
Черемис.
Cheremis, this is the exonym for Mari. So what like traditionally the Russians have historically called the Maris.
Журналист.
Journalist,
Конвейер.
conveyor,
Дарвинизм.
Darwinism,
Матч.
match,
Кварц.
quartz. Okay, so we have all the consonants at this point. And that just leaves us with a few more vowel signs. And you might notice a certain duality of vowel signs at this point. Like we've already had an E vowel sound, and now we're getting another one. We're going to look at this now in a few slides. But yeah, for now, the basic pronunciations are
Йо. И. Ю. Я. Актер.
actor,
Поэт.
poet,
Пенсия.
pension,
Германия.
Germany,
Химия.
chemistry,
Бавария.
Bavaria,
Дебют.
debut,
Австрия.
Austria,
Эстония.
Estonia,
Меню.
menu,
Шлюз.
Sluice, or German Schleuse, if you know that one.
Юрист.
Another one that English doesn't really have, lawyer.
Мюнхен.
Munich, like German München.
Чехия.
Czechia,
Эффект.
effect.
Солженицын.
Okay, this is an author, the Nobel Prizing author of the Gulag Archipelago and other notable works.
Гёте.
Goethe. So here you're also seeing something that like German Ö becomes Yo in Russian.
Хрущев.
The premier of the Soviet Union.
Азия.
Asia,
Горбачев.
another leader of the Soviet Union.
Ювентус.
Juventus, the Italian football club.
Юнга.
Okay, so this comes from German, or I can't even remember if German or Dutch, but it's connected with German Junge, which is like boy, and then thus also with English young. And in Russian, it's like a junior sailor.
Цюрих.
Zurich,
Як.
Yak. Okay, so that's almost it. We're through the alphabet with two exceptions that we're going to get to, these two symbols that are neither consonants nor vowels. We're going to have a look at them soon. But first, back to the question, like an early exercise that I often give my students is that they should write their own name in the Russian alphabet. And since I'm teaching in Austria, they'll often have German names or Czech names or whatnot. And then they're not sure what to do with the H, because H is a sound that Russian just does not have this sound. So what happens with it in Russian? So there's a bit of a historical dimension here, is that the Slavic G sound, in some Slavic languages, this has stayed G, and in some Slavic languages, it has developed to H. So if we have, for example, these three Czech words, so I don't have a native speaker here, Chat, Castle, Hora, Mountain, and Lava Head. In the Russian, cognate forms of these are
Град. Город. Гора. Глава. Голова.
Okay, and this historical dimension is also relevant because you, in modern Slavic languages, have a split that you have the h pronunciation, not just in Czech, but also in Ukrainian, for example, in Southern Russian dialects, for example, whereas the g pronunciation you have in all South Slavic languages, in Polish, in Lower Sorbian, and in Russian. And this kind of sort of this connection between g and h, it is on some level still sort of present to the modern. I'm not sure if it's exaggerating to say that it's like mentally present to the modern speaker community, but a connection between these sounds, the sound of h and g, is like very visible in modern Russian too. That due to that connected with this, it is just sort of like accepted that g is, well, historically was the counterpart to h. This is like the historical side of it. But then you have another aspect is like, you think of like the sounds that Russian does have. What is actually the closest sound that you have to h? And you could also reason that it is h, the h sound that we had. And so often in Russian, if the question is if h then corresponds, if a h in a non-Russian language is rendered as a g in Russian or as a h, it depends on when a word entered the Russian language, how old and how well established it is. And usually older and more well established means g, and younger and less well established means h. And we can have a look at a few examples here. Like, for example, if we have Hamburg in Germany, important city and has been an important city for a long time. This in Russian is then
Гамбург.
If we look at Hudson Bay in Canada, also historically important, relevant thing, this in Russian is
Гудзонов залив.
If we look at Helsinki, however, Helsinki in Russian is
Хельсинки.
Yeah, don't worry about this little thing in green yet. We'll get back to that in a moment. But so Helsinki, the Finnish name for this city, has only in fairly recent days been used internationally. Because I mean, historically, Finland was part of Sweden, and the national language was Swedish, and Swedish place names were used internationally too. And as a result of this, if we look at the Swedish name for Helsinki, the Swedish name of Helsinki in Russian, it was then rendered as
Helsingfors.
So here you see, older means g, newer means h usually. And sometimes we actually have some variation, like the town of Heidelberg in Germany, a famous university town. So in some circles, it might have already, you could, from some angles, you could consider it an old and important place, but it's not nearly as well known as Hamburg, for example. And you can actually find alternation in Russian texts. You find both of these variants.
Heidelberg, Heidelberg.
Another nice example of this this duality that you have sometimes is the town of Hanover in Germany, medium-sized city south of Hamburg, which has of course had historically been a very relevant place, which in Russian is then
Ганновер.
But Hanover in Germany has given its name also to places elsewhere in the word. For example, the town of Hanover, New Hampshire, where Dartmouth College is, which then in Russian becomes
Hanover, New Hampshire.
Yeah, and so here you can see that Hampshire gets the g, but Hanover gets the h. So it's not always fully predictable, and if you are not certain how to transfer your name into Russian, think if there is some famous person who shares part of your name or has a very similar name, and what you can do is look up that person on English Wikipedia, and then look at the Russian version of that article, and see if that name is written with a g or a h. Like if your name is Helmut and you're not sure, you can think of, well, there was Helmut Kohl, the Chancellor of Germany. find Helmut Kohl's article, go to the Russian version, and there you can see that he was Gelmut rather than Helmut. Okay, while we're at the topic, this is also a fundamental question that students often have. What do we transcribe into Russian? Do we transcribe the pronunciation or the the pronunciation of a name or the spelling of a name? And to give the handing away, it's going to be a bit of a mix, a bit of a hybrid. We're closer to rendering the pronunciation of a name, but some artifacts from spelling are transferred. For example, if showing how we primarily transcribe pronunciation. If we have the town of Bordeaux in French, this in Russian becomes
Bordeaux.
So we don't worry about all of this stuff what the French is doing here. We just write what we hear. If we have, for example, this guy, Rudolf Steiner, in Russian, this becomes, and here we just, if you speak German, you will know this, that an S before T is pronounced as a sh, and you don't, even though it is rendered in what orthographically usually would be a s. And this in Russian is then
Rudolf Steiner или Steiner.
Yeah, so the rendering of the vowel is variable here because his I sound in German Russian doesn't really have that. But if we look at the former German Chancellor Helmut Schmidt, for example, he in Russian becomes
Helmut Schmidt.
So here we see this DT that we have in the Russian transliteration of the or transcription of this name. This doesn't actually mean anything because you don't separately pronounce a D or a T. So it's not fully just the pronunciation here. We do here have an artifact of the German spelling here, but it's like an artifact that doesn't matter from Russian logic because that this can't be pronounced as anything other than T. That's consistent with Russian pronunciation rules. So you do find sort of minor deviations from this general rule that I said that you transcribed the pronunciation. A few more examples. Like if we have Albert Einstein, he becomes
Albert Einstein.
And the next example is a bit reversed example because this is somebody Russian-born, who you might know her in English as Alexandra Eichenwald, and in Russian her name is
Alexandra Eichenwald.
But if you know German, you might be noticing here something here that her surname goes back to the German word Eichenwald, oak forest. But here it's just rendering the German word Eichenwald in Russian orthographic as close as you can get to it. And this is something that is very typical, especially for people with Jewish roots in the former Soviet Union, that they'll often have German names that are then transliterated into that were long ago transcribed into Russian, and then and if you use them in English, you then have a transcription of the transcription, so to say. Another a wild example is this person here, famous Soviet-born American science fiction writer, whom you might know as Isaac Asimov, who, though he was born in Russia, he strongly identified as an American. And when his works were translated into Russian and published in Russian, he insisted that his name in Russian be written like this.
Isaac Asimov.
Even though his birth name was this here.
Isaac.
Yeah. So what happened there is that he was born with this version that's in, of course, a rendering of the Cyrillic, of the Hebrew name. When his family immigrated to America when he was a small child, the Americans didn't adhere to the Russian pronunciation, and he ended up then feeling just the way that Americans pronounce his name, that this is his name. So he did not want his name spelled in the original Russian name because that does not represent the actual pronunciation of his name, how he felt it. Okay, so much to this point. Let's get to the two letters that I have been keeping for you, the so-called hard sign and the so-called soft sign. But before we get to that, you can only understand the function of these letters if you first understand how vowel symbols in Russian work, why we had this duality of vowel signs, why did we have two A's, why did we have an own letter A and a Ya here? So in Russian, we have a duality of vowel signs where we always have one that is a so-called hard vowel sign and one that is a so-called soft vowel sign. In technical terms, that would be non-yotated or yotated. What does this mean, hard or soft? It means little as regards the pronunciation of the vowel itself. There can be small alternations here. And this pair here I have put in, I've colored here because the general system sort of, it's a bit complicated here. But what it basically means is that if we use, so yeah, and
Я,
yeah,
Е, И, О, Йо, У, Ю.
So as you heard, in all of the, except for here, the vowel itself was basically the same in both pronunciations. And what these sounds mean, it depends on where in a word they occur. But basically, the soft pronunciation means that the choice of the soft vowel sign means that either the preceding consonant, if there is a consonant before it, is palatalized, and this is something that is very, very common in Russian and very widespread. If you have a consonant followed by the soft vowel sign, that consonant is palatalized. If it is followed by the hard vowel sign, it is not palatalized. And this is then, especially if you're coming from like German linguistic tradition, you have to be careful. This is what Russians mean when they talk about hard vowels and soft vowels. It is the difference between a palatalized and a non-palatalized consonant. We're going to be hearing some examples of that in a moment. They do not mean voice, as is the case in German. Like in German school grammarians would say like that a voiced B is a soft consonant and a voiceless P is a hard consonant. This is not how the nomenclature works in Russian. And so this is if we choose, this is what the choice of this vowel symbol after consonant means. If we, however, use these vowel symbols elsewhere, like after a vowel or word initially, then the difference between the two means that the soft one is preceded by a y in pronunciation. So if we, for example, here see different usage, like the different combinations of a and ya with one another. Maybe let's go through these.
Са, ся,
Mm-hmm.
О,
Mm-hmm.
Уя,
Mm-hmm.
А, Я.
So you will hear that the vowel was always the same in all of these cases. The difference here was in how the consonant is pronounced. Is the s just, is it non-palatalized or is it palatalized? Here, is there a little y between the u and the a or not? Is there a little y before the vowel or not? And this is what the difference between these do. And let's just, to make it systematic, let's go through all of these.
Се,
Mm-hmm.
се,
Mm-hmm.
Уе, Уе,
Mm-hmm.
Е, Е.
Great. So the third one here, the system sort of falls apart. And this is something that where like scholars of Russian are till today arguing about the status of these two sounds to one another, or these own phonemes, or the allophones of one another. We're not going to get into that. Just know that they are in a relationship with one another, where the top one is the hard one and the bottom one is the soft one, but here the vowel sound is actually different. So.
Фы,
Mm-hmm.
Си,
Mm-hmm.
Уи,
Mm-hmm.
И.
Yeah, and these are missing because that just doesn't happen in Russian. Yeah, but here you see, even though the vowel sound is different, we still have this alternation that the first one was not palatalized and the second one was. So.
Со, сё,
Mm-hmm.
О, уйо,
Mhm.
о, йо,
Great.
су, сю,
Mhm.
уу, ую,
Mhm.
у, ю.
Great. So as I mentioned, this palatalization has an important role in Russian. Not all consonants, but most consonants have alternations between non-palatalized and a palatalized variation. And rather than having, so basically Russian has adopted a logic where rather than having an own symbol for all palatalized variants, like having an own letter for a s and then palatalized s, they use the choice of the following vowel sounds to sound the choice of the following vowel sign to indicate if the consonant is palatalized or not, which is more economic because you have 5 to 6 vowel phonemes in Russian, but much more for consonants. So you need fewer letters for this system to work. So that's basically the internal logic that we're working with here. So this next one here, I don't think we have to go through all of these, or unless you want to, Xenia, or
We can.
we can. Okay, so this is just giving you an overview of all these letters that we have in all the positions that we have that we were that we were showing, like what it's like at the begin, what this vowel sign is pronounced like if it's in the beginning of a word, what it is pronounced like after a vowel, and what it is pronounced like after a consonant. And yeah, we can go through them in pairs again. First we look at the a, then we look at the ya, etc.
And I guess since the translations are here, I can just read the words themselves.
Yeah.
Август, туалет, лагерь, японец, фаянс, табулятор, электрон, поэт, сэр, евро, проект, текст. Тактичный, индекс, украинец, инстинкт.
I should note that there are these missing fields. This is just, it doesn't happen in Russian, at least not in a systematic fashion. So we have no examples to give there.
Октябрь, виртуоз, талон, ёршик, прием, летчик, узбек, клоун, турист, юрист, союз, шлюз. And I actually noticed that проект here in Russian, that's a kind of exception. So it's pronounced проект actually, as if, so there is no y in between, but something like боец, fighter would be a good example.
This is good to know because this is directly from a Mari textbook, so we should replace it there.
Yeah, well, this pronunciation happens sometimes, but it's not standard.
Yeah. This means for those of you that are watching this because you're studying Mari, a bonus thing, I should have mentioned this earlier, all these words that we have here, we picked Russian words that are also used in Mari. So you can use all of these words that you are learning here. Okay, but so here you see now that in after consonant, the choice of my vowel sign, like you can indicate if a consonant will be palatalized or not by picking the appropriate vowel sign to follow it. So if you, for example, here have a like a T that is not a non-palatalized T, you just use the U afterwards and it's not palatalized. If you have an L that is palatalized, you just use the U variant to show that it is palatalized. What you do, however, when you want to indicate if a consonant is palatalized or not palatalized, but there's no vowel coming after it, if it's like in the final position of a word. And that is now where the soft sign and the hard sign come in. In modern Russian, mostly now just the soft sign. So we'll have another look at the hard sign in a moment, but basically the soft sign in modern language is you use the soft sign to indicate a palatalization that you cannot indicate by choice of vowel sign, because there is no vowel coming after it. So in a final position, if the last consonant of a word is palatalized, you need the soft sign. If a consonant that is followed by another consonant is palatalized and you have no vowel in there to indicate if it is palatalized or not, you need the soft sign. So these would be, let's just do the bottom row for now.
Форель, фильтр, коньяк, павильон.
Right, and so the hard sign, historically, it was used as the equivalent of this, that you in final position to indicate that something is not palatalized, you would use the hard sign there. And eventually, around the time of the briefly after the revolutions of 1917, the usage was abolished. And it's not part of the modern Russian orthography anymore to always have the hard sign at the end of a word. But you see it a lot in pre-revolutionary texts in Russia. So it is something like, I would say, Xenia can correct me if I'm wrong, but my sense is that if you see a word with the hard sign at the end of it, it makes it look very old-timey immediately. It looks like it is very clear to Russian speakers that this is something pre-revolutionary if you have the hard sign at the end of a word. In modern language, the hard sign, it is marginal but important. Let's put it this way. It's it doesn't occur very often, but one should know what it does when it does occur. And you only have it in some foreign words and at morpheme boundaries. We're going to look at the morpheme boundaries in a moment. But if we have a word like this one here, the aid.
Adjutant.
So what we have here is that we had an D that is not palatalized, followed by U. And naively one might assume, why don't I just write A, D, U, blah, 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 blah. But if you wrote A, D, U, it would be A, palatalized D, U. So you would have a palatalization that you don't want, but you would not have your Y sound. So when you basically use the hard sign as there, it is sort of as a stop and reset sign. It means, okay, pronounce everything up to here as if it was a word of its own, and then pronounce everything after this as if it was at the beginning of a new word. So pronounce the U as if it was in the initial position. Pronounce the D as if it was at the end of a word with nothing else following it. Here we have an overview of what you do. What do you do if you have a non-palatalized consonant followed by a vowel? What do you do if you have a palatalized consonant followed by a vowel? What do you do if you have a non-palatalized consonant followed by a Y followed by a vowel? What do you do if you have a palatalized consonant followed by a Y followed by a vowel? In the last case, it works. The logic is the same like what I just talked about with adjutant, just that you use the soft sign here. Yeah, and maybe let's do these still.
Катод. Актер. Адъектив. Компьютер.
Great. So I mentioned morpheme boundaries, and this is if you were studying with Mari, this is then if you're studying Mari, this is interesting point is here that basically in Mari you also just in Mari you also just see the hard sign in some loan words like adjutant or adjective and at morpheme boundaries. Why morpheme boundaries? Well, I have a specific Russian example to illustrate this. And now we're going to start with the transcription and then look at what the Cyrillic rendering of these letters are, because they're going to show us why we need the hard sign sometimes. So if we have a word to sit down.
Сесть.
Right. So if we want to render this in orthography, how do we do it? Well, we have a palatalized S followed by an A, followed by an S, followed by T that is palatalized. So we can do it just like this. We use the only S that we have. Then we use the soft Y, which then indicates that the S is palatalized, then S and T. And then now here we don't have a vowel after this, so we have to have we need to have the soft sign here to show that the final T is palatalized. Now we have a word to eat.
Есть.
So how do we render this in orthography? Well, we have ye at the beginning. We had this rule that the soft e, if it stands at the beginning of a word, like we had with yevo or whatnot, we just write it like this. We don't need to explicitly indicate the y sound because the soft ye at the beginning of a word, this already includes the ye sound. Okay, but now come the morpheme boundaries. So Russian makes ample use of verb or prefixes, often to mark that something is perfective. You have these in these spectral pairs that you have in Russian. You often have verb or prefixes to indicate that. So we have, for example, a verb or prefix s that we attach to the word to eat, which then means to eat up, which would then be pronounced as
Съесть.
So maybe can we just to really stress that these are different things, Ksenia, can you say this one then followed by this one?
Сесть. Съесть.
Okay, so the difference might sound subtle to you, but it is definitely there. And from Russian native speakers, it would be no problem to hear this difference. That these are different things that she is saying. So how do we make sure that this is not that you from writing know that this is not pronounced the same as this? You can't by just using the soft ye. And this is then where we need the hard sign. We need to show that then we have the hard sign here saying that this is not palatalized. It's pronounced as if this was the end of that word. And what comes after this is pronounced just as if it was at the beginning of the word. So that is what we have in the line right above it. Okay, and so, like in Mari, for example, we'll have the hard sign used in compounds in the similar way. It doesn't happen in many words, but it happens in some important words, like the Mari word for man includes this. Okay, so that's it. You know the alphabet at this point. And just knowing the Cyrillic alphabet, in my experience, can do a lot to demystify Russia in general. That if people don't know the alphabet, they're traveling around Russia and they see everything is like in some alien lettering and everything is completely extraterrestrial to them. They have no idea what is going on. But once you know the Cyrillic alphabet, you might find yourself wandering through the streets of Yoshkar-Ola as I was when I took this picture, and you might see things like this, and where you before would have just seen some alien writing that must mean some Russian concept that you have no idea about. If you know the Cyrillic alphabet, you'll be able to read this as
Beauty house.
Of course. So a few notes still on some difficult aspects of the Russian alphabet that you are going to have to deal with. The first one is italics. And that is, if we look at the alphabet as we know it at this point, in non-italic form. I should have also put the uppercase versions here just for completeness sake. I'm sorry. I can still add that to the version of the slide set that I put online. Okay, so these are the versions of the letters that we learned now. What happens if we make them italic? And what happens is that some of the letters become borderline unrecognizable. And I've marked them here in red, the ones that you have to be extra careful about, that they just look very different in italics. And like, for example, here, the T in italics, it looks like from a Latin M. And this is then often students that are just learning to read a language using the Cyrillic alphabet will then often find a T in italics in text and read it as an M. You just have to learn to be careful here. Likewise, here you have to be careful with the E. Looks like a Latin U, but obviously it's not. It just needs some practice. Likewise, Cyrillic handwriting. Cyrillic handwriting can be pretty difficult. Here I've taken an excerpt from our Mari textbook. So this is the Mari alphabet. It has some letters that the Russian alphabet doesn't have, like the U here and the Ö and the, where is it? The M. But this is how our Mari colleague wrote the letters of the Cyrillic alphabet. And I have also given here a Mari poem written out in Cyrillic alphabet that you can have a look at. One thing that is somewhat tricky, it is a bit like when writing Russian letters, some letters have to have a little hook before them, like the L must have a tiny little hook before you write, and you can, and it's somewhat difficult to see it here. Here it suggests you can also find materials online that show you like practical guides to writing Russian in the Cyrillic alphabet. Yeah, another point that to briefly address, which is usually nowadays more relevant than the question of how to do Cyrillic handwriting for modern students, it's how to type in Cyrillic. And one thing you should know there is that there are two, like for keyboard layouts for languages that use the Cyrillic alphabet, there are two basic principles, and you will often find different Russian keyboard layouts following these two principles. You will find the sort of the normal Russian keyboard layout as it's used by Russian native speakers, but you will also find keyboard layouts like this one here on our website, morilanguage.com, that are so-called phonetic keyboard layouts. And what is happening here is if you look at the Russian keyboard, like the proper Russian keyboard layout, and this is our keyboard layout for Mori based on the Russian keyboard layout. The letters here, it is Y, C, U, K, E, and if you compare that to a Latin keyboard layout, you'll see that there's no correlation of the arrangement of the letters. So they're arranged in a completely different way, and you have to learn to type anew if you use this kind of keyboard layout. If you use a so-called phonetic keyboard layout, as you have here, the ordering here is Ya, Sh, Ye, R, T, Z, U, I, O, P. And this is like specifically for users for Hungarians designed. If you compare a Hungarian keyboard layout to this, you'll have, okay, where the Q is on the Hungarian layout, you have a Ya here. Where the V is on the Hungarian layout, we have a Sh. So those are a bit strange, but then we have E, Ye, R, T, T, Z, Z, U, I, O, P, P. So what a phonetic keyboard layout does, the so-called phonetic keyboard layout, is that it has the arrangement that is as similar as possible to the base keyboard layout, like in this case, Hungarian. So if you already know to type using the Hungarian keyboard layout, the P is going to be at the same place of where the P is. Which kind of keyboard layout makes more sense for you depends on your situation. If you are aiming to spend a lot of time in Russia working on Russian keyboard layouts, then it makes sense to learn to type using the Russian keyboard layout. If you are only going to be typing Cyrillic using your own devices, your own laptop, your own phone or whatnot, then it's probably doesn't make sense to do that, and you'll be better off with a phonetic keyboard layout. So you have to decide that for yourself, what for your situation makes the most sense. So this concludes the presentation itself. Finally, we have some exercises that we're not going to walk you through completely anymore. You're on your own now. But what we have here is just our 6 slides full of names. Names of people whom you, odds are you won't know all of them, but we hope you will know a large share of them. We couldn't find, of course, we can't find 6 slides full of names that absolutely every person on the planet will know. But yeah, so depending on what your interests, what your background are, you'll recognize you might not recognize some of them, but you'll recognize most of them. And what you should do here, like our suggestion here, is read these names until you don't, until you're no longer struggling to read them, until you can read them fluently. So if we are starting through, you might still be struggling with this, but eventually you'll figure out that this is Albert Einstein. Eventually you'll figure out that this is Dolly Parton, and eventually you'll find out that this is Bob Marley and Batman, etc. But as you go through these slides, and I'll just show them long enough, each of you can also pause the video. As you are going through the slides, you will hopefully find yourself investing increasingly little effort until you can read them. So this is the last slide. Okay, so that concludes our introduction to the Russian Cyrillic alphabet. If you're studying Mori, you can now proceed to watch the video introducing the Mari Cyrillic alphabet, and in which I discuss how the logic that we have presented today is adapted in by the Mari Cyrillic alphabet. So thank you especially for Xenia for joining me for this session, and see the rest of you in the next unit.